Hey there, this is Bernie Borges for a special edition of the Social Business Engine podcast. This is actually the first time I'm recording a podcast on Blab. Yes,
Yay.
Blab, B-L-A-B. And I remember the first time I actually did a Blab, and it was very awkward. So here we are experimenting with Blab for our podcast. And I am joined today by Amy Heiss from Dell and Suzanne Doughty. So let's first begin with some introductions. Amy, why don't you go first?
Okay, Bernie, thanks for having me back on the podcast. You know, it's my second time. I'm now an old pro.
Except you're not old, you're just a pro.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm the director of social media, employee training and activation at Dell. So my job is to activate Dell's employees to use social on behalf of our brand, share our brand story, but also share their area of expertise in the business. And I love it. I have a great team behind me that is creative, funny, amazing. Every day we have a good time.
And I remember you saying when you were on my podcast for the first time that you have the best job in the world in social media.
I still do. Hasn't changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, look, there's Heather.
Hey, Heather. Now, for those who are listening to this in the future, audio only, you'll have to kind of tolerate the nuances that we allude to because we're in video, right? And if you're just listening to the audio, just please, tolerate that. So, Suzanne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, Bernie. Thanks for having me. I'm Suzanne Doughty. I work in the same general area as Amy, but I'm on the global social business team. It's a global center of excellence here for social media. Specifically, I manage Dell's overall presence on LinkedIn and Google Plus and SlideShare. Those are my main platforms.
Okay, terrific. Well, maybe before we get too much further, if either or both of you would like to maybe comment on Dell's social business position as a global brand. Everybody knows who Dell is, but not everybody knows really the size of your footprint as a global brand, 100,000+ employees, et cetera. So you want to just elaborate on that a little bit?
I'll be happy to take this one, Suzanne. If you'd like, you can add on to what I miss. So we believe that social media is a tool, just like the phone or email is a tool. And so we use it to connect with our customers in every part of the world, in every part of our business. And so if you're a real social business, then you're not using social just for marketing or for pushing your product. You're using it as a comprehensive way to hear from customers about what products and services they'd like to see. Recruiting and HR. We have our finance people using social to connect in the communities to get the best and brightest finance ideas that are coming to light. We're using it for tech support and care. It's really 360 degrees of our business, and that's why when you see social posts coming from Dell, you often see hashtag social360 because we're really looking at it as the full customer and the full experience.
Awesome.
No, absolutely, Amy. Our strategy is to embed social throughout Dell. So Amy's team is in charge of all the training for that. And a lot of people at Dell are trained on social media thanks to Amy's team. And we look at it as a tool that is used every day, just like the phone, email, social media. We want to empower people throughout Dell to use social media.
Social media is like the phone. I love that. Okay, so one follow-up question on that, if I may. What is the current, if you can comment on this, what is the current headcount at Dell? And approximately how many people have you trained at Dell on social media?
We have about 100,000 people at Dell now. And as you know from the news, there's some changes afoot in terms of our business. I can't comment any further than that. But we have about 110,000 now, and that's growing. And we have 16,000 that are certified out of that group.
16,000. Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Awesome. So then if you were at a cocktail party and you were talking about what you do and someone said to you, what do you mean by social business? Just what is a social business? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I would answer it as kind of a look back. What most people think about social media is just kind of the traditional way is you're talking about what you had for breakfast or something. And social media is so much more than that. If you think about it, we use social media to inform our product teams on what features are important to customers. We use social media for customer care and tech support. We use it in just about every facet of our business. I know the topic today is social selling, and that's one area that we're also growing to use that more and more.
Yeah. Okay. Amy, you have something to add to that?
I think the social business is really about connecting with our customers in this new platform, where they are, right? And it's wherever they are. So we have customers who still want to connect with us over the phone. Great. That's a customer that we value, and that's a platform that we'll continue to be on. We also know a growing number of customers choose to participate in digital communities and platforms, and they're talking about our products or services. They're talking about what they'd like to see. They're talking about experiences they're having. Or they have questions about, business in general around big data or Internet of Things. And as a social business, you should be participating in those conversations. You should be providing helpful information. You should be developing, these connections and conversations that lead to further content and collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Amy, actually, you brought up just a really good point, which is, we want to be able to meet customers where they are. And a good example of that is Google Plus. There's so much out there about how Google Plus is, maybe not, a top tier social media platform. Well, I can tell you that our Dell audience, we have two big audiences on Google Plus, and those are IT pros and gamers. And they actually get a little bit ticked off if I bring in, say, a tweet, or if I say, oh, you can find out more on Twitter. They don't like to be taken off their platform.
Yeah.
They want to stay on Google Plus, and they want to talk to us on Google Plus. And so people are, you want to meet them where they want to be. And so that's what we try to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And David Fisher saying that it's all about conversation, the interaction of people and ideas. And I totally agree. So let me give you my definition of social business. And Amy, you may have heard my definition before. I try to plaster it all over the web. I believe that a social business is any organization, regardless of size, that embraces what I call both the culture and the technology of social, because I think social media is both culture and technology. Mm-hmm. And a social business also embraces the fact that its employees are part of the brand, and that engagement should occur both externally with customers, of course, and prospective customers, as well as internal engagement. And I think a true test of a social business is, are the employees engaging internally through some kind of social technology to foster communication and collaboration to really build that culture? And I remember one of my very first guests on my show, Todd Forsyth, he said that they had to learn to be social internally before they could be good at being social externally. Yep. And that really, really resonated with me. And I remember that was a couple of years ago. So that's my definition of social business. And I think Dell is one of the best examples, if not the best example, that I've come across.
Well, thank you. I know that there are some, other great companies that are doing it well, but it's interesting. Companies who haven't caught on to it yet, who don't trust their employees to post social, or who don't see the value in listening, which we start with. Everything we do starts with listening. And Patrick's asking what tool we use. And internally, we use Chatter, Salesforce Chatter, for our social media interaction. And we do exactly as you mentioned, Bernie. We actually ask our employees after they've gone through our SMAC training to start a Chatter and get comfortable using social media as a platform for, building connections and getting information and sharing information. And once they're comfortable there, then they can move onto external platforms where they can start to engage with customers. And we always start with listening first. You should never just jump into a conversation. And we really want it to be about providing value and insights versus providing coupons and discount codes.
Right.
Yeah. So David Fisher, I'm reading the comments, and David reminded me of something I'm really not good at. I'm not good at promoting myself, but he encouraged me to promote the fact that on episode 100 of the Social Business Engine, on that podcast episode, I devoted the whole episode to what is social business.
Great.
Kind of what we're doing going forward. So for those listeners out there, if you haven't listened to episode 100, give that a listen. All right. Let's move on to talk about social selling. What is it, and how is Dell doing social selling?
First, it is not selling in social.
Let's get that straight.
And we don't do a wonderful job as an industry of describing some of these activities in what we're doing in social. We call our our employees who share content in social employee advocates, and that's not a super term. It doesn't really convey what they're doing and how much business value they're adding for a brand when they do that. And we call these connections that we need to make with our customers in social selling, which then does sound like we're using social media to sell.
Right.
That ruins the whole thing, because when they're trying to look in social for whatever their interests are. So social selling is about developing relationships and touch points with customers, either while you're trying to acquire that customer, or once you have that customer, the touch points that you want to maintain with them throughout their life cycle, so that they're a customer for life. And that's relevant information. It's helpful articles. It's congratulating them on their kids' t-ball game. It's being a part of their life and forming a genuine, authentic relationship with them through social. And for businesses who can't get, to every customer and provide a handshake every time they need to see that customer, it's a really good way of maintaining a relationship.
Yeah, a better term might be relationship selling through social.
Yes, it's something. There's got to be
should be a better word.
Well, I can't help but think of the analogy of like when I listen to music, it's either on the radio or in a music streaming service, right? I mean, we all know what they are, right?
Spotify, yeah.
And then occasionally, if you still have CDs in a CD player, but when an artist releases a new record, it's still called a record, right?
Right. An album.
Selling, right? Or an album, right. But
Mm-hmm.
when was the last time you put an album on an actual phonograph, right?
Right.
Anyway, I digress a little bit, but it just reminded me of that.
For your podcast audience, let me say, David Fisher just gave a good definition too in the chat box, and that's that social selling for David is using new tools and platforms to support and further the already existing sales process.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, I like that too. It's not about, it's nothing magic about it. It's about the relationships. People want to buy from people they like, and you show who you are. You can show who you are through social.
Yeah, it's the old kind of Chamber of Commerce saying, people want to buy from who they know, like, and trust. Yes. And social is just an avenue to further that. Yeah.
Now, just to read the second half of what David typed in the chat box, he also said that if selling is about conversations and interactions, we've simply moved where some of that is happening. And I really like David is saying some. He also capitalized some. In other words, emphasizing that some of those conversations, some of those interactions are happening in social channels. And sometimes I kind of use the word, I do use the word digital channels to be a little bit broader, Mm-hmm. And, social is digital, right? So I guess they're synonymous. But I like the emphasis on, you've got to find where some of those conversations are happening in these social channels and then look for the opportunity to participate in them. Here's a challenge that I see, though, in this world of quote unquote social selling. So for those listening to audio only, I'm using my fingers in air quotes around social selling. And we experienced this within my own agency and our clients. And that is that in some industries, there are people that are not active on social.
Mhm.
And when those sales professionals are trying to engage with those people, they struggle in actually even finding them on social. So that, I think that comes back to David's point about some of those conversations are happening on social. So maybe Suzanne or Amy, if you can kind of comment on, you've got a global sales force. Do they encounter situations like that where maybe some of the people they're trying to reach aren't on social? How do they manage that?
Yeah, I can help with that. And Suzanne, jump in. How about that?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a small medium business segment at Dell. So there are some small businesses, mom and pop shops, or even larger businesses who just don't want to have a social presence either because of the type of content that they have or the industry that they're in might be highly regulated, or they don't have the staff to maintain a social presence, and that exists. And certainly in that case, you can use some of the channels that we have in social to send email as well to those customers so that you can still share relevant content that you're finding in the social space or in the digital space with them in an email. I was about to say in a traditional way through email.
Yeah, still digital. Yeah.
But certainly, and by the way, if you're doing social selling, that doesn't mean that you no longer go in person to meetings or you no longer have the phone calls. I think it's just one more tool. And David's right. It's some of the conversations are happening there, but you're likely not closing every deal because of a tweet. It's likely a part of this holistic engagement with the customer.
Yeah, and I think, there are probably a lot of high-level decision makers who are probably not on Twitter. But I think that, and maybe I'm partial because I manage LinkedIn at Dell, but I think a lot of people are on LinkedIn, even when they're not on Twitter. And at the very least, they have a presence there, even if it's not, a 100% perfect profile. They're at least on LinkedIn and they might have their title on there. If they've been at a company for 20 years or so, they might think of LinkedIn as only an online resume, and not necessarily a place to connect and learn. Which LinkedIn, I think I saw a stat that they have. It's a content social network right now. It's certainly not just an online resume thing. People get a lot of content from LinkedIn. So I think that at the very least, in terms of social selling, you can become more knowledgeable about your buyers, and you can use the advanced search, for example, to find people at the company that you are interested in. Get lay of the land just by looking at connections and reading descriptions of what they do, and even seeing, you looked at this person, here are other people just like that person. So you can actually learn quite a bit from LinkedIn.
Well, David Fisher is giving you a big prop, saying absolutely, and Denmark 98, he's saying that social selling is multi-channel. There's lots of different channels and different touch points. I want to shift gears a little bit, Amy and Suzanne, and I want to talk about best practices and worst practices. And I want to begin with worst practices because, first of all, we're recording this live on a Friday afternoon, so I'm feeling a little bit punchy, okay?
Aren't we all?
That, right? So why don't we start with some worst practices? And you probably, because you both work at a large brand, and Amy, you run the whole, university environment, you've probably seen it all.
Mm-hmm.
And for David, you've seen quite a bit as well. So what are some worst practices, kind of, maybe like a David Letterman, like top 10 list of things you never want to do in social selling?
Oh, yeah. And David is saying, oh, yes, he has. So, one thing we see that is a big mistake in social selling is just talking about yourself or your company.
Absolutely. Dell.
We highly, highly recommend our employees spend only at most 20% of the time talking about Dell. Everything else should be focused on the industry or focused on the topic that can be helpful. Dell should be 20% or less of that. And even when you're going into that 20%, It should not be coupon codes. It should not be transactional posts. Like, no one wants to have that. So that's a terrible one. One thing I don't like just personally is when someone I don't know wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I tend to connect with people. But then the first thing they do is send an email that starts with I and has 15 other I's in it. And they don't know me and they haven't really gotten to know me. They couldn't have. So I think another huge mistake people make in social is.
Can I jump in on that? Because you know what you remind me of, Amy? You know what I've seen? Some people jump into the sale in the invitation to connect.
Exactly.
And here's what I want to sell you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thank them for doing that because I know that I can decline that invitation. You don't really want to connect with me. You want to sell to me. So
sorry, but you reminded me of that. So go ahead.
Yeah. What else do you see? Oh, here's Denmark saying he has 16,000 connections that that I abandoned that thought. Oh, yes. You abandoned the thought of just no. Explain more what you're
I think
saying.
you said he's using don't send people in-mails on LinkedIn that you don't have a connection to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So some other worst practices, Amy or Suzanne?
Well, I think you need to be transparent, and on LinkedIn, it's Twitter. I guess it's a little bit easier to be somewhat anonymous. If I talk about Dell on Twitter, my handle is Suzanne_Dowdy. So I don't have one of those @Dell handles. So if I say something good about Dell, and this is a policy at Dell, you want to say, I work for Dell, we have this great XPS 13 and it's in gold now. It's awesome, but I need to disclose that I work for Dell. So one of the things that you don't want to do is, mislead people about your intentions. So on LinkedIn, it's not as easy to do that. But that's one of those things that you don't want to do. And this is just a profile thing. When you have your profile, I think it's a little funny when some people say like, Suzanne Dowdy has worked at Dell for 3 years and is in charge of the social business platforms. So writing in the first person because you wrote it is also something that's, I think, a good idea.
Authentic. And Jill Rowley has been to Dell and has been a part of our conferences. So I want to quote Jill Rowley on this one and give her full credit. Don't say that you're a quota crusher in your profile. Reaching out to the salesperson, I'm going to look at you and who you are and what your profile says about you. And as soon as you say quota crusher, I'm probably moving on from there. And I see that David put some good comments too for your podcast. One of the biggest mistakes almost everyone makes is not considering their own personal brand. And he makes a good point about that. We actually work with David at Dell, full disclosure and transparency, to help with our personal brands of our executives and some of our salespeople. And, it's amazing because people have a hard time figuring out how to talk about themselves. And so they don't, on their brand, on their LinkedIn profile, they'll leave the summary blank, for example, or they won't give information about what their past jobs were and tell the story of their career. They'll just put a resume on the page. And so it's true that one mistake that you make in social selling is not showing me why you're an expert in your area and why I would want to listen to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move to some best practices. And of course, when you talk about best practices, we sort of infer that the opposite of that would be a best practice. So rather than just infer, let's actually get to some specific best practices. And if you would, to the extent that you can, in terms of speaking about it, maybe give a few examples that you've seen, whether it's at Dell or elsewhere.
I'll just start with one, be helpful. It's not about selling, it's about being helpful. So, and Amy might be able to provide some specifics, but if people are asking questions, you don't have to talk about Dell products, but you can point them to different resources that will have some of the answers that they're seeking. Informative resources, non-salesy type of resources, but just something that will be really helpful.
Yep.
providing really good content too that isn't clickbait is always useful for people. And I like what Denmark 98 said about being consistent. I love what David said about being patient. For us, we do feel like, social selling best practice is about forming a relationship over time. And listening is another one that we think is really important for social selling, because you can use information that may be very benign. I'll give some examples to, to indicate that a sale might be afoot. So, for example, we have a customer who the team that worked with that customer just regularly read their blog, the customer's blog. And in one blog post, they mentioned in one sentence of one blog post, something that alerted the team that perhaps they were in need of an upgrade at the data center level. And so they took the initiative after reading that blog to do some more research within the customer, to work with them, and to come up with a proactive proposal that would be helpful for their business, that wasn't salesy, that was really about solving a customer's problem. Mm-hmm. And so none of that would have been possible, first, without listening. And then secondly, going to them and giving them a realistic solution to a problem they were facing versus a sale that might have benefited them and Dell in a different way, was great because it worked out well.
I love that they started with listening. I love that.
And then I'll share personally, unless you have something else to add, Bernie.
No.
Do you guys watch America's Got Talent? Anybody watch that show, or is it just me?
I don't really watch it.
There was a comedian in 2013, so that's been a while. And his name was Tyler, and he came in second. And I tweeted him, and I think it was September of 2013, saying, "Oh man, we were, rooting for you. You had us laughing so much. If you're ever in Austin, let us know." And this week, he responded to that tweet saying, "Hey, I'm in Austin. Come see me. Got tickets," and that's what we're doing Saturday night. So that's a great use of social selling. He responded right away to the tweet, that night or the next day of, "Thanks so much. It was a good experience." But then he followed back up. He went back to that, researched his tweets and then sold tickets to the show.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what about this scenario? You've got a sales professional who understands the concept of being helpful and being patient. All the attributes that we're discussing here that are best practices. But that sales professional, maybe he or she has a sales manager who doesn't quite understand that. And the sales manager is asking, like, "Why are you spending so much time on social media? Show me what deals you've closed from that." How do you deal with that?
Well, we have a lot of education around that with our managers. And what we found is the best recipe for social selling success at Dell is having a direct line sales manager committed to the process of social selling along with his team or her team, as well as the general manager of sales for that division committed to these relationship development methods with social. And then also, and this is the key, having marketing support with that sales team, coaching from marketing, help with listening reports from marketing. So marketing can actually provide for sales articles that are relevant to their customer set that would be helpful to share, but also can tell them who their customer set is in social. Because I haven't found it, and maybe somebody who's listening could let me know if there's such a thing, but is there a tool that matches your email with your social identity? We can't find that, right? Or if it's out there, it's not 100% effective. And so the marketing teams do a lot of manual work to match for our sales team who their customers are with where they are in social and how they can follow them, and then start to form those relationships. So we found that you need all of that to make a good recipe. And salespeople don't need to spend more time doing non-selling functions. They do enough of that. They want to spend their time in the active selling mode. And so everything we can do to feed them content, to feed them data about their customer set, to even give them things for their LinkedIn profile, like what's Dell's end-to-end story that you can plug into your LinkedIn profile to help as you're creating that. All that we can hand them helps sales to use it, and it helps the sales leadership to see, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm going to see reward on the back end. And we've seen, salespeople who are using social are making business connections. And in our recent pilot that just ended with our North America group, we saw a number of sales opportunities that were directly attributed to the social media activity of those sales leaders, of those salesmen, I should say. And as a result, we have people coming from everywhere saying, I want to learn more about social. I want to use it more. We're seeing
funny how that happens, right?
And now it's catching on, and we can't even. It's so many people that we're having to hire, more folks on my team to help us out, or to get people from our regions to help. So it's been great.
Yeah, just one thing I'll add more from the small and medium-sized business perspective, because I used to be a small business owner, and I used to do the whole Chamber of Commerce thing. And so one thing we used to tell our clients when they would talk about the effectiveness of social media and sort of quantifying that, and we would make the analogy with the Chamber of Commerce. Well, how do you why do you think it's important to go to the Chamber of Commerce and be a part of that? How do you measure that effectiveness? And that's hard to measure as well, but everyone knows how important it is because it's a huge source of networking context. So we just kind of made that analogy, the networking, the relationship building that you can make in social, and building up trust. Those are things that are kind of hard to quantify. I'd be interested to hear more about Amy's pilot. I know that they've recently come up with those results, but these are things that are hard to quantify. But things that Amy mentioned, such as training and getting marketing buy-in, are really important.
So I definitely want to hear more about the pilot as well. And Amy, as you and I discussed, I want to have a dedicated podcast episode around that when you're ready. So you can let me know when you're ready for that. What I want to do now, though, is I actually want to wrap up the recording part of this blab and then still leave a few minutes outside of recording for others to maybe join in. We have one open seat. But at this point, I want to thank my guests, Amy Heiss and Suzanne Doughty from Dell. We've had a really terrific conversation here around social business, social selling worst practices, social selling best practices, and then a lot of really great input from David Fisher, who was going to be part of this blab, but due to some chipmunk audio freaking
difficulties,
get his audio to work. So rain check on David Fisher, but he contributed nonetheless without any audio through the chat. So once again, thanks everyone. This wraps up the podcast portion of this blab. So I'm going to stop recording now.